Welcome back to Deep Dive English. Today we are decoding the language of love and modern dating.
And it's a language that it seems to evolve faster than any dictionary can keep up with.
Yeah.
Honestly, if you stepped away from the dating pool for just a couple of years, you might feel like you need a translator.
I feel that. I really do. It feels like every 6 months a new term pops up to describe, an ancient human behavior.
Exactly.
And if you're trying to navigate the waters of connection, or let's be real, just understand your friend's emotional dramas, you need a quick start guide to the vocabulary.
And that's really our mission today.
Right.
We've taken a very simple, very conversational source. It's an exchange between two people, Jessica and Dan, where Jessica is just describing this disastrous date she had, and we're using that real-world chat as a kind of skeleton.
A framework.
A framework, yeah, to unpack the 5 most functional, most essential terms you need to know right now. These aren't just, academic concepts. They are the tools we use to manage expectations and process emotional data in 2024.
This is truly the operating system update for your social life. And the beauty of using a conversational source is that we're translating how these complex ideas like red flags, green flags, how they actually play out in real life. We are translating the chaos into structure for you, the learner.
And I think we should start by asking the critical questions that make this deep dive so necessary, because if you've been through this, you know the urgency.
Have you ever been ghosted? Do you know your red flags? Because if you're unsure about the answers to those questions, you might be walking right past a massive warning sign.
Or agonizing over a vanishing act you don't even have the vocabulary to describe.
Exactly. We're here to change that.
So let's get into it.
Okay, let's unpack this. We begin where all good dramatic dating stories start, with a failure.
Of course.
So Jessica had just gotten off a date, and her summary to Dan was just brutal, concise, and so modern. She just says, terrible, major red flags everywhere.
And that phrase, major red flags everywhere, that's the perfect anchor for the definition, isn't it? A red flag in the context of dating is defined in our source simply as a warning sign that a person is bad news.
It's so simple, but so effective.
It is. It's an immediate signal saying, stop, observe closely, and proceed with extreme caution, or, ideally, don't proceed at all. It's like the traffic light shifting from yellow to flashing red the moment you approach the intersection.
And what's fascinating to me is how these warning signs bridge the gap between, classic character flaws and these distinctly modern missteps. Jessica's date was apparently full of them, but let's start with the classic example that really defines the category.
It's a foundational one.
Exactly. Even if she didn't explicitly mention it in her dialogue, we have to talk about rudeness.
Yes. If we look at the whole category of red flag, rudeness, and specifically rudeness to people perceived as being in a service role, so a waiter, a bartender, a valet, that is the absolute gold standard of early warning signs.
It's like red flag 101.
It is. It's the foundational red flag upon which all the others are kind of built.
But I want to push on that a little. Why? Why is that specific, seemingly minor behavior like being snappy with the sommelier or complaining a bit too much to the server? Why is that such a powerful universal red flag? Couldn't they just be having a bad day?
That's a great practical question, because that's the excuse, right? So many people excuse it as stress or a bad day.
Oh, work was really tough this week.
Exactly. But the behavior speaks directly to two crucial pieces of character information. First, it shows a real inability to display basic human empathy or respect towards people from whom they can gain absolutely nothing.
Right. The waiter holds no power over their dating success.
None. So the person doesn't feel the need to impress them. And that's when the social mask just drops.
So you're saying the first date is this ultimate high-stakes performance, and the service staff are kind of the unwitting members of the audience who get to see the real show.
Precisely. And second, and I think this is even more critical, it suggests a hierarchical view of other people. If they believe it's acceptable to treat a service worker as less than, they are fundamentally signaling that they view the world in terms of utility and power.
They categorize people.
They categorize people. In simple terms, they're showing you they believe the world is divided into people who matter and people who don't. And right now, on the date, you matter because you are the target of their affection or their pursuit.
But that category is flexible.
That category is very flexible.
That is such a deep insight. It's not just about manners. It's about future entitlement. So the critical thinking prompt here is, when will you eventually fall into the category of people they feel entitled to treat poorly.
Exactly. Red flags are all about predicting future behavior based on these small observable actions now. It's predictive behavior analysis, really.
And we shouldn't overlook the other conversational red flags that fall under this umbrella, should we? I mean, things like extreme self-absorption.
Oh, absolutely. We need to look for those signs. Did they interrupt you frequently? Did they spend like 80% of the date talking about their exes or their personal grievances or their own achievements without ever asking a genuine follow-up question about you?
That's a huge one. When you realize an hour has gone by and they know nothing about you.
Right. And all of these things signal a fundamental inability to center others, which, by definition, makes them bad news for a healthy relationship.
So that's the act of disrespect. Now let's pivot to the distinctly modern red flag that Jessica did encounter, which is, I think, equally toxic but far more passive. She complained to Dan that her date was on his phone the whole time.
Yes. This is a perfect example of how red flags evolve with our technology. Rudeness to a waiter is active disrespect. You're actively shouting or complaining.
It's overt.
It's overt.
Yeah.
But being glued to your phone is phubbing, or passive disrespect, and it is just as damaging to a new connection, if not more so, because it implies you're just utterly irrelevant.
So what does constant phone use really signal, beyond just the obvious lack of presence?
Well, it signals a few really destructive things. First, a severe lack of respect for shared time and investment. They are communicating that whatever is on their phone, scrolling Instagram, a group chat, even urgent work emails, is objectively more important than the person they chose to spend their evening with.
They're prioritizing external digital stimulation over internal human connection, right there in front of you.
Yes, it's the ultimate communication of, I am physically present, but emotionally and mentally, I am completely elsewhere.
And that ties into the second, and I think more painful signal, which is a difficulty with emotional availability.
Yes. The phone acts as a security blanket, doesn't it? Or a digital wall. By keeping their attention divided, they are controlling the depth of the interaction.
They're keeping it shallow.
They are ensuring the conversation remains shallow, preventing any real engagement or vulnerability. They are basically protecting themselves from connection by constantly seeking distraction.
So a passive way of communicating disinterest. You don't have to say, I'm bored. You just withdraw your attention into your device. That inability to be present, to invest in the moment, is just as much bad news in 2024 as any of the older, more overt red flags. The modern red flags really do revolve around the attention economy and presence.
And that's why we need green flags. If we're spending all this mental energy looking for the bad news, we absolutely need a counter system to tell us when we should invest our time and our attention.
Right. If red flags are caution lights.
Then green flags are the clear sign. They're saying, proceed, this person is worth your time and emotional investment.
Our source highlights two critical examples of green flags: emotional maturity and listening well. Let's start with that clinical-sounding term, emotional maturity, and make it practical. What does it actually look like on a first or second date?
Emotional maturity is really the complete antithesis of all those reactive and selfish red flags we just talked about. It means they've done the work on themselves, and practically, you see it in, I'd say 3 specific behaviors on a date.
Okay, give us the tangible actions we should be looking for.
So the first one is handling a minor logistical failure. The waiter brings the wrong dish, the reservation is messed up, or you get completely lost trying to find the bar.
Ooh, that's a good one.
How do they react? If they handle that disruption calmly, maybe they laugh it off, or they constructively communicate with the staff without any anger, that is a huge green flag.
Because it shows they can manage their own internal state.
Exactly. Without externalizing that stress onto others, they are emotionally stable under a little bit of pressure.
That's the real stress test, isn't it? Not just the conversation itself.
Exactly. The second one is the genuine apology and taking responsibility. Let's say they're 5 minutes late, or they accidentally misremember something you said. Do they offer a concise, genuine apology? I'm so sorry, my bad, I should have checked the time. Or do they get defensive?
Or blame traffic, or blame you for giving the wrong directions.
Right. That willingness to just admit fault and take responsibility is the absolute cornerstone of trust.
Okay, and the third, practical behavior.
Self-awareness expressed through boundaries. This means they can talk about their feelings and their needs without projecting them onto you. If they say something like, I had a great time, but I know I need a few days to decompress before our next date because work was stressful, that's excellent.
Wow, that's very specific.
But it shows they understand their own limits, they communicate them clearly, and they respect the structure of this new relationship.
That shows self-knowledge. And that self-knowledge is the foundational strength you need for a healthy adult relationship. It means the relationship won't constantly be about fixing or managing their unacknowledged traumas.
Precisely. It's the ability to sustain a relationship regardless of whether the spark is currently high or low.
And the other green flag mentioned, listening well, that connects directly back to the red flag of the constant phone user.
Absolutely. The red flag was digital withdrawal. The green flag is focused attention. And active listening is so much more than just waiting for your turn to talk. It means asking specific, probing follow-up questions that demonstrate you actually retained what was said 5 minutes ago. Did they remember the name of your dog? Or the specific job title you mentioned earlier?
It shows they're not just hearing, they're processing.
Right. If they listen well, they indicate genuine interest and respect. They are investing their most valuable resource, their attention, in you. They are signaling that they want to build a shared reality, not just audition for a role in their own personal narrative.
That investment is key. Green flags are indications that the potential partner isn't just interested in the idea of you, but they're invested in the reality of building a shared future.
They are showing up fully, they are stable, and they are demonstrating that they can handle the inevitable friction of life without dissolving into chaos or entitlement.
Okay, let's move from identifying traits to identifying a specific frustrating behavior that is almost synonymous with the modern era of dating: ghosting.
Ghosting.
This is what Jessica had to deal with. Her complaint to Dan was so straightforward. He just ghosted me. Stopped texting. Vanished like a ghost.
The term itself is so powerful because it perfectly captures that experience of digital abandonment. The definition we're working with here is clear: disappearing without a text message, ending communications suddenly.
It's a complete silent withdrawal.
A complete silent withdrawal from digital presence, leaving no trace, no explanation, and often no context at all. It's just silence.
The sudden, silent termination. And the source explicitly notes, it's so common now.
Right.
So why? In this age of hyperconnection where we are constantly tethered to our devices, why is absolute vanishing the preferred method of ending even a casual connection?
Well, we have to analyze the implication of the digital landscape here. Digital communication, texting, DMs, it has fundamentally changed the social contract of dating.
How so?
It's lowered the friction required to start a connection to almost zero. You can match, chat, and set up a date in 5 minutes, but critically, it also lowers the friction required to end it.
So ghosting is just the path of least resistance?
It is the ultimate path of least resistance.
Yeah.
Back in the pre-cell phone era, if you wanted to break up, you usually had to make a phone call. Or, in more formal situations, meet in person.
Right. There was a social contract that demanded a degree of closure, even if it was just a really painful conversation.
That's the key contrast. Those older methods required accountability. They required a vocal articulation of the reason, even if it was a fabricated one. Ghosting avoids that uncomfortable, mandatory conversation entirely.
It leverages the medium.
It leverages the specific nature of the medium, yes. Texting relies on reciprocity. When that reciprocity just ceases, when one person decides to stop typing, the relationship dies a silent, unnatural death.
They treat the relationship like a chat thread. They can simply be muted, archived, or deleted without any human cost to themselves.
Which is the ultimate cowardice.
It really is.
And this leads us to the subtle variations of ghosting, because it's not always so abrupt. The classic ghosting is the hard ghost, just instantaneous silence after a seemingly good date or a prolonged conversation. But we also see the slow fade.
The slow fade. Tell us about that.
The slow fade is the protracted, torturous version. Instead of vanishing immediately, the person starts responding to texts less frequently. Their messages get shorter, less enthusiastic.
One-word answers.
Yes, they stretch the time between communication from hours to days. What they're hoping is that you will pick up the hint and initiate the final break yourself.
So they can avoid any responsibility.
It removes any responsibility from them. It's pure passive aggression manifested through poor texting etiquette.
That almost sounds worse than the hard ghost, because it keeps the recipient in this constant state of agonizing uncertainty.
Psychologically, it often is worse. The defining pain point of ghosting, regardless of its speed, is the complete lack of closure. When a relationship ends, even a short one, the recipient needs information, a reason, an explanation, a verbal acknowledgement that the connection existed and has now ceased.
And ghosting denies all of that.
It denies that information entirely, replacing it with this paralyzing ambiguity.
So the person who is ghosted is left with the terrible question: was it me? Did I say something wrong? Are they in a ditch somewhere?
Yes. The absence of communication forces them to process the termination based on absolute silence, which turns the focus inward, wondering if they themselves were at fault for the vanishing act.
It creates this severe cognitive dissonance.
It really does. You go from active conversation and maybe shared planning to zero presence instantaneously. The brain just struggles to compute that transition because there's no external data point to mark the end.
And this is why having the term ghosting is so important.
It's crucial. It names the exact emotional experience, and it shifts the blame away from self-doubt and onto the specific disrespectful behavior of the other party.
So when Jessica told Dan she was ghosted, she wasn't just saying he stopped talking to her. She was describing the pain of sudden, silent, and often guilt-inducing abandonment that is uniquely enabled by our digital communication patterns.
It highlights how transactional and disposable digital connections can sometimes feel, even when real feelings were involved. The fact that this term is so common now tells us something profound about the shifting social norms around accountability and empathy in the digital dating space.
It is a modern pain that requires a modern term to describe it.
And hopefully to analyze it and maybe push back against it.
If red flags are warning signs to observe, and ghosting is the ultimate exit strategy executed by someone else, let's talk about establishing your own non-negotiable boundaries. We're moving into the essential territory of the deal breaker.
Yes, the deal breaker. This is the defined absolute. Our source defines it as a specific thing that makes you reject someone immediately.
It's the ultimate veto button.
It's the point of no return.
And we absolutely must draw a clear distinction here between a red flag and a deal breaker, because I think they're often confused. They both signal a problem, but they require radically different responses.
The distinction is critical for efficient dating analysis. A red flag is an indication of potential future character issues. It tells you to proceed with caution and further observation.
So it requires patience and investigation.
Exactly. For example, if they seem slightly unreliable or a bit self-absorbed, that's a red flag. You might observe it for a few more dates to see if it's a pattern or just an off day.
But a deal breaker is immediate rejection. It requires no further investigation.
Precisely. A deal breaker is an immediate, non-negotiable end. It means stop right here. It's less about observing character flaws that might surface later, and it's more about required compatibility right now. It's a structural incompatibility.
It's based on values, core beliefs, lifestyle, or future goals.
Yes.
So let's analyze the first specific example provided in our source material. When Dan asked Jessica about her deal breakers, she mentioned smoking.
And smoking is an excellent, time-tested example of a deal breaker based on lifestyle and health incompatibility. If you are, say, training for a marathon, or if you have severe allergies, it is genuinely hard to reconcile a future with a smoker, no matter how charming they are.
And this incompatibility isn't just irritating, it's structural. It's non-compromisable because it fundamentally affects your shared environment and your shared goals.
Exactly. If you're planning a future with someone, you are signing up for shared air, shared living spaces, shared travel, shared health trajectories. If one person has a habit that fundamentally conflicts with the other's core values around health or environment, you are setting yourself up for long-term relational friction.
The deal breaker signals an impossibility.
It signals an impossibility to reconcile the difference. It's an inherent conflict of value that cannot be fixed by communication.
Okay, then we have Jessica's highly specific and very personal deal breaker, someone who doesn't like dogs.
I love this example because it seems so small and quirky on the surface. But it reveals the depth of personal values and the proxy role that a deal breaker often plays.
What do you mean by proxy role?
Well, for Jessica, or anyone who makes pets non-negotiable, the relationship with pets is a core life requirement. It's not just about the animal, it's about what the animal represents.
Right. It elevates the pet from just an animal to a member of the family unit.
Absolutely. So if a potential partner views a pet negatively or doesn't understand the level of commitment and responsibility and joy a pet brings, they are fundamentally misaligned with the person who views pets as family.
So the deal breaker acts as a proxy for empathy.
Empathy, capacity for nurturing, willingness to care for the vulnerable, and alignment on how the future home and schedule will operate. It's a stand-in for a whole host of other values.
So while the red flag like rudeness is about character failings, the deal breaker like dogs or smoking is simply about misalignment. You can be a wonderful, kind, emotionally mature person who just happens to hate dogs.
But for Jessica, that still means the relationship is a non-starter.
That's the critical takeaway. Deal breakers are highly individual, and they reveal the boundary between desire and necessity. They are the personal lines in the sand that define what you absolutely require in a partner to make a shared life viable.
And defining them saves you months of effort that would ultimately end in frustration and resentment.
But let me push back on the idea of defining too many deal breakers.
Yeah.
This is something you, the learner, need to consider. If you create a list of 50 deal breakers, no smoking, must like dogs, must read Flaubert, must earn exactly X amount, must fold laundry a certain way,
Right.
isn't having too many deal breakers actually a red flag in itself? Aren't we risking being too rigid and narrowing our options too much?
That is a brilliant and necessary counterpoint. There is a very fine line between discernment and rigid perfectionism. If your deal breaker list is a mile long and mostly superficial, it might signal an unwillingness to compromise or even a fear of vulnerability that you're masking with impossible standards.
So you have to be honest with yourself.
You have to be. We must remember that a deal breaker must be structural, something that if you compromised on it would make your life actively unhappy or unsustainable.
So we should ask ourselves, is this a preference or is this an impossibility? For example, disliking their taste in music is a preference.
Right. But smoking or hating your child or your pet is an impossibility.
I see.
The value of self-knowledge here is immense. If you haven't clearly defined your true structural deal breakers, you risk wasting time observing minor red flags when a major irreconcilable incompatibility is already present.
So defining your boundaries is the first step toward efficient, trauma-free, and healthy dating. It shifts the focus from passively reacting to someone else's flaws to actively filtering for your own required happiness.
Exactly.
We spent a lot of time talking about what we want to avoid, the red flags, the deal breakers, but dating is also fundamentally driven by positive initial forces. We need to discuss the initial fire, the essential draw, the spark.
Yes, the spark. The source notes that the spark is synonymous with chemistry and defines it simply as the feeling of chemistry or excitement on a first date.
It's the instant electric burst of energy that makes the whole arduous process of dating worthwhile.
It really is.
It's the feeling of butterflies, the intense eye contact, the ease of conversation, the immediate sense that this person is different, interesting, and attractive. It's the thing that gets us out the door for a second date.
Yes, it overrides our natural desire to just stay home and watch Netflix.
Totally.
It is the initial fuel. It's the necessary primal component for getting the relationship started, the compelling attraction that makes you want to explore further. Without some level of the spark, the logistical hurdles of dating, coordinating schedules, revealing vulnerabilities, moving into emotional intimacy often feel too demanding.
And the relationship just fizzles due to inertia.
Exactly.
But here's where we need to dive deep into the necessary versus sufficient analysis. The spark feels like everything when you have it. Is the spark enough to build a life on?
Absolutely not. And understanding this distinction is perhaps the single most important lesson in modern dating. The spark is necessary for liftoff, but it is entirely insufficient for sustained flight.
I like that analogy.
The mistake people often make is prioritizing the intensity of the spark over the stability of the green flags.
Let's explore the physiology of the spark a bit. Why does it feel so intense and compelling, sometimes even addicting?
Well, the spark is often a cocktail of neurochemicals.
Right.
Dopamine and norepinephrine, firing off because of novelty, excitement, and a degree of perceived risk. Novelty is exciting to the human brain.
We're wired for it.
We're wired for it. We are drawn to people who are slightly mysterious, unpredictable, or challenging. Often, the intense spark you feel is actually rooted in unresolved tension or the addictive cycle of seeking validation from someone who feels just out of reach.
So the feeling of electric chemistry might actually be our brain confusing anxiety or the feeling of walking on eggshells with passion.
Precisely. We must contrast the electric, often volatile nature of the spark with the stability offered by our green flags, like emotional maturity and listening well. The spark is a feeling. Emotional maturity is a skill set.
And a feeling can fade.
A feeling can fade. A skill set is consistent.
You can have an incredible, overwhelming spark with someone who simultaneously displays massive red flags. The person who is rude to the waiter, the person who keeps you guessing with slow fade texts.
No, all the time.
That intensity, that fire can sometimes mask deep structural problems, leading to what some might call trauma bonding.
Yes. The spark is fast. It happens in the first few seconds or minutes, but green flags require observation over time. They are demonstrated through consistent, predictable, and often, frankly, boringly reliable behaviors.
You don't get dopamine hits from reliability.
You don't. But reliability is what prevents the catastrophic structural failure of the relationship down the line.
So if we use an analogy, the spark is the luxury sports car that draws your attention and gets you excited. But the green flags are the reliable engine, the safety features, and the well-maintained foundation of the house. You can't live in a house built entirely of spark.
You would burn down the entire neighborhood. The strongest, healthiest relationships possess a moderate, growing warmth, a continuous, low-level green spark combined with high levels of stability. If the spark is at 100% and the red flags are at 80%, you are heading for disaster.
But if the spark is at 60% and the green flags are at 90%,
You have a foundation that can truly endure.
this means the most dangerous type of relationship, the one that causes the most pain, is the one where the spark is intensely high, but it's completely undermined by red flags and deal breakers.
That combination is almost irresistible because the intensity of the feeling blinds us to the factual data we are receiving. Our vocabulary, red flags, green flags, deal breakers, is designed to force us to look past the feeling and process the data.
So bringing it all together, a successful start to a relationship requires a specific complex recipe that relies on rational assessment, not just pure emotion.
It requires all the elements working together in a specific order. First, you need the spark to create the momentum and the desire to continue the interaction. Second, you must have the diligent and consistent absence of major red flags, ensuring the person is not bad news or high risk.
Third, the presence of green flags.
Yes, to provide the observational evidence of stability, empathy, and long-term potential. And finally, you must ensure they don't trip any of your personal structural deal breakers.
It's a holistic assessment. You can't just chase the emotional high of the spark and ignore the fact that they have terrible character or are structurally incompatible.
The spark gets you in the door. The green flags keep the house standing. By naming these concepts, we give you the tools to move past confusion and make informed, rational choices about your romantic life, rather than just being swept away by intense but ultimately misleading emotions.
The vocabulary we've decoded today acts as a triage system.
Exactly. It allows you to rapidly assess the situation and apply the appropriate filter. The goal is efficiency and safety in your dating life.
This has been such a comprehensive and I think essential breakdown of the modern vocabulary of dating. We started with a simple, gossipy conversation between Jessica and Dan.
And we realized just how much complex social data is embedded in those short phrases.
For sure. So let's quickly synthesize the 5 functional terms we've armed you with, the learner, for more efficient dating analysis.
Let's do it.
We began with red flags, the warning signs, the bad news indicators, often showing character flaws like the deeply ingrained disrespect of rudeness to a service worker,
Right.
or the modern digital disrespect of constant phone use.
Then we contrasted them with green flags, the good signs, indicators of stability, empathy, and potential, proven through behavioral consistency and demonstrated in things like emotional maturity and the skill of active, focused listening.
We analyzed ghosting, the modern vanishing act, the sudden silent termination of communication made easy by the low friction of digital platforms, which results in painful ambiguity and a total lack of closure.
Next were deal breakers, the absolute, non-negotiable rejection criteria that reflect deep personal values like lifestyle, health, or core family commitments like dogs. And we stress that these must be structural, not just minor preferences.
And finally, the spark, the initial excitement, the necessary fuel that starts the engine, but which by itself is insufficient for sustained connection. It must always be supported by the stability of green flags and the absence of red flags.
The value of this vocabulary is no longer just being able to describe what happened, but being able to predict what will happen and to make better choices about where you invest your finite time and emotional energy.
When you can name the behavior.
You can analyze it, and you can respond to it effectively, rather than just feeling confused or hurt.
That structural clarity is genuinely liberating.
And if we connect this all back to the bigger picture, the pain of ghosting is entirely defined by the sudden cessation of digital communication, the silence of the phone. And that raises an important question for you, the learner, to explore as technology continues to change.
Okay.
If dating technology shifts entirely away from text and voice calls, say, towards increasingly realistic virtual reality interactions where our avatars meet and interact in digital spaces, what will the next term be for vanishing?
Wow.
How will we define ending communication suddenly when our very digital presence is the only tether we have left? If a person deletes their profile and removes themselves from the shared digital space, will we be de-rendered? How will the future define abandonment?
A fascinating, slightly dystopian thought to leave on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the lexicon of love and loss. We'll catch you next time.